Have you ever wondered what it takes for an empire as powerful as Rome to fear one man? Not a king, not a Caesar, but an African freedom fighter whose name Rome tried very deliberately to erase from history. Today, we journey into North Africa around 17 CE to uncover the story of Tacfarinas, a Berber warrior, a master of desert warfare, and the man who outsmarted the Roman Empire for nearly a decade. A man who exposed Rome's weaknesses. A man who forced them to rethink their strategies. A man whose story, for 2,000 years, lived only in scattered lines of Roman texts. But what if Tacfarinas represents something much bigger, a global pattern of forgotten resistance movements, from Africa to Asia to the Americas, erased simply because they embarrassed an empire? This is the Histovian Tales, and today we resurrect the legacy of one of antiquity's most brilliant yet buried military minds. North Africa in the 1st century CE was not an empty desert, nor a fringe corner of Rome. It was a thriving region of Berber kingdoms, farming communities, rich trade hubs, and hardened desert tribes, collectively known as the Amazigh. Rome wanted Africa for one thing: grain, lots of it. North Africa was Rome's breadbasket, feeding millions in Italy. But Rome's presence wasn't peaceful. Taxes were brutal. Land was seized. Local tribes were forced into harsh labor or conscripted as auxiliary troops camps where abuse was common. Tacfarinas? He started as one of those soldiers. A North African man conscripted into Rome's auxiliary forces. A man trained by Rome, and later feared by Rome. But Rome underestimated him. They didn't realize they were training the leader of the greatest anti-imperial resistance movement North Africa had ever seen. Tacfarinas eventually deserted, an act punishable by death. But instead of vanishing into the dunes, he began forging alliances among Berber tribes. He united desert nomads, farmers, raiders, and displaced communities, many of whom had lost their land to Roman estates. Rome labeled him a bandit. Modern scholars see him as something far closer to a guerrilla general. Tacfarinas built a mobile desert-hardened army, multiple tribal alliances, supply chains across the Sahara, camps that Rome struggled to locate. And most importantly, he used guerrilla warfare decades before the term existed. Hit-and-run attacks, food supply disruption, destroying Roman outposts, fading back into the desert where legions could not follow. Rome, built for open-field battles, was suddenly fighting a war they had never trained for. The war with Tacfarinas lasted nearly 9 years. That's longer than some Roman emperors' entire reigns. The Roman historian Tacitus, our only major source, describes a Rome repeatedly humiliated, a Roman fork wiped out, troops ambushed in territories they thought they controlled, convoys burned, Roman commanders replaced after embarrassing defeats. Tacfarinas even learned Roman diplomacy. At one point, he demanded a formal treaty, offering peace in exchange for land. Rome refused. But the fact that Tacfarinas made that demand shows he saw himself not as a rebel, but as a leader equal to Rome. This infuriated Emperor Tiberius. Tacitus writes that Rome was ashamed that a man they saw as a deserter could force legions into defensive positions. By the 8th year, Rome was desperate. They deployed nearly 1/3 of all African Roman forces to stop him. Finally, after years of losses, Rome launched a massive, multi-pronged campaign to trap him. Tacfarinas was eventually cornered and killed in battle. Rome celebrated loudly. Too loudly? Which clues us in that they feared him far more than they admitted. And after that? Silence, no statues, no records from his people. Only Rome's attempt to portray him as a minor nuisance instead of the general who exposed their vulnerability. But history remembers through cracks. Oral traditions in North Africa kept his legacy alive. Modern historians brought him back. And today so do we. Tacfarinas' legacy challenges everything we think we know about ancient Africa. Africa wasn't passive. It produced military geniuses who resisted the world's most powerful empire. Africa wasn't isolated. North Africans fought in Roman formations, traded across the Mediterranean, built cities, and influenced imperial politics. Empires fear resistance and erase it. The absence of African heroes in popular history isn't an accident. Tacfarinas is a case study in historical erasure. Guerrilla warfare didn't begin in the modern era. Tacfarinas was doing it 1,900 years before textbooks mention it. His story resonates today. Around the world, formerly colonized nations recognize the pattern. Empire invades, gives local leader rebels gives. Empire labels him a bandit, gives history is rewritten. By restoring Tacfarinas to the center of his own story, we don't just honor him, we restore Africa to global history. He belongs in the same category as Queen Amanirenas of Kush, who defeated Rome, the Numidian king Jugurtha, who nearly collapsed Roman politics, the Garamantian kings, who controlled Saharan trade, the Almoravid generals who reshaped medieval Spain. But unlike them, Tacfarinas was never given a kingdom, crown, or monument. His resistance lived in the desert. His army lived in the wind. And his story lived in fragments until now. So who was Tacfarinas? A deserter? A rebel? A general? A freedom fighter? Maybe he was all of them. But one thing is undeniable. Prove that even the mightiest empire on earth can be shaken by the will of a determined people. Rome tried to forget him. We refuse to. And if you want to keep exploring these hidden stories, these erased heroes, and overlooked civilizations, you need to join us. Like, subscribe, and share the Histovian Tailies, because we're just getting started. And next time, we explore another buried chapter of World History 1 that textbooks barely whisper about.